The galaxy had all but forgotten Earth. 2 centuries ago, the cradle of humanity fell into silence, first politically, then technologically, and finally biologically. Reports of planetary collapse trickled through the interstellar accord. Ecological ruin, civil wars, orbital bombardments. The last confirmed message was a fragmented cry from a Martian relay, cut short mid-sentence. Most species believed the humans had done what they always seemed fated to do: destroy themselves. And after a few decades, the stars moved on. Trade flowed, empires rose and fell, and Earth became myth, spoken of in cautionary tales or analyzed in xenology classrooms with detached academic interest. Humanity's systems were marked as dead zones, space left alone out of disinterest rather than fear. Then the artifact appeared. It was found drifting beyond the Kuiper expanse, where solar wind thins to a whisper. An automated mining scout from the Delari hegemony picked it up. It was a black obelisk, covered in unfamiliar etchings and sealed with alloys the Delari couldn't scan, let alone crack. Within 48 hours of retrieving it, the Delari scout ship vanished. That would have been enough to warrant an investigation. But it didn't end there. 2 weeks later, strange signals began pulsing from the edge of known space. They weren't in any known galactic language. They were complex, layered, recursive. Experts across 10 species debated whether it was music, code, or a warning. It was the Varnic Union, a logic-bound machine race, that decoded the signal. It was in a forgotten Terran encryption method. When finally translated, it simply read, "We rise." The message repeated every 72 hours on all frequencies. Speculation turned to alarm when a fleet emerged from behind the Ort wall. A cold, dark stretch of void no ships had crossed in centuries. The fleet didn't match any known human designs. Gone were the blocky, utilitarian crafts of Earth's final era. These were angular, obsidian-clad vessels, emitting signatures so warped they twisted sensors into chaos. Artificial gravity radiated off them like heat. They didn't respond to hails. They didn't announce intent. They moved with purpose. The Accord scrambled to react. An emergency summit was called on Rigel 3. The Drakkathi warlords wanted to attack immediately. The Illurian choir urged diplomacy. The Varnic Union merely observed, silently updating their models. No one knew what the returning force from Earth wanted. But they all agreed on one thing. Humanity hadn't just survived. They had changed. On board the flagship of the Terran Ascendancy, Commander Riva Solis stared out into the void. She had been born in the vault cities beneath the scorched surface of Earth. She had grown up on stories of betrayal, of the alien empires that had turned their backs on humanity in its darkest hour, of the Accord embargoes, of the orbital blockades, of the final, brutal exile. Her people had spent the last 200 years not just rebuilding, but transcending, forging technologies outlawed by the Accord, embracing hybrid evolution, fusing machine, flesh, and quantum mind. What emerged from Earth's ashes was not the humanity the galaxy once knew. It was something sharper. Riva turned to her adjutant, a floating drone node housing the memory cores of 4 post-human tacticians. Status: all systems nominal. Contact imminent with Accord Periphery Fleet. 14 vessels. Mixed species. Outdated tech. Riva gave a cold smile. Let them see what we've become. The obelisk had been just the first message, a symbol that humanity had not died, that Earth's silence was not surrender, it was incubation. She raised a hand. Activate the broadcast. Across the fleet, every vessel flared with a pulse of light, visible and metaphysical. A second message screamed through the stars, unignorable. We remember. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt a chill, not of space, but of reckoning. The Accord was in disarray. Across the galaxy, council chambers erupted into frenzied debates. The enigmatic fleet that had emerged from the Ort wall carried a singular and undeniable truth. Humanity had returned, but they were no longer the species the galaxy had once known. For the first time in decades, the ancient memory of humanity's aggressive expansion their fierce survival instincts, and their penchant for unyielding conflict resurfaced like a waking nightmare. The Varnic Union remained silent, watching. Their cold, calculating minds analyzed the data, their processors unable to compute a clear outcome. If the humans had undergone such an abrupt shift, what could they now be capable of? On the surface of Rigel 3, the emergency summit between the galaxy's powers raged on. Representatives from the Varnic, the Dracathi, the Illurian Choir, and other influential factions sat in a tense standoff. Their former unity was a fragile thing, no longer held together by shared interests, but by fear. Fear of what the humans had brought back from the ashes of Earth. Humanity's return is not a coincidence, the Illurian emissary, Talara, said, her voice crystalline and melodious, yet edged with unease. They are not here for trade, not for peace. Their message is simple. We're eyes. Dracathi General Crag, a towering beast of muscle and bone, thumped his clawed hand on the table. They will seek to dominate us. They always do. They are not the same, Talara argued. There is something otherworldly about their fleet. It's as if they've become something beyond us. In the cold reaches of space, Riva Solis stood at the helm of the flagship, watching the trembling multi-species fleet that the Accord had sent as a response to her people's arrival. Her fleet was not large, but it didn't need to be. Their ships pulsed with strange, invisible energy, more alive than mechanical. The nanite alloys that made up their hulls shimmered like liquid, capable of bending light, and their weapons hummed with frequencies that made the vacuum itself ripple. She thought of Earth, the last city, the final days when the last human governments had fallen to alien conquerors, the oppressive silence that followed, how the remnants of humanity had fled underground, using the ashes of their old world to fuel an era of growth unlike anything seen before. Earth had become a breeding ground for new ideas, a crucible in which humanity was forced to evolve or die. They had become something unrecognizable to the galaxy. Activate the perception array, Riva ordered, her voice unwavering. From the flagship's command deck, a screen flickered to life. Data streams poured in. Every ship in the Accord fleet was now within range of their sensors. Riva didn't need to be told what it meant. Every ship, from every race, was preparing for battle. Their weapons, once dormant, were coming online. The galaxy had decided to fight, and humanity would either win or perish trying to prove that they were not just a shadow of their former selves. But Riva knew better. They wouldn't be fighting for their survival. No, humanity was beyond mere survival now. They would fight to prove their dominance, not as a species clinging to the past, but as the rightful inheritors of a galaxy that had forgotten them. Send the transmission, Riva said, her eyes locked on the expanding fleet. Let them know who they face. A burst of quantum energy erupted from the flagship's core, traveling across the stars, spreading in an instant through every sensor, every relay. It was not a message of words or images, but an overwhelming presence, a force that reverberated through the very fabric of space. In an instant, the galaxy's entire communications network was hijacked. For a brief, terrifying moment, every species across known space would hear the same thing. We are the ashes. We are the phoenix. The stars were not ready for us. The message was a signal, a declaration. The galaxy recoiled. On Rigel 3, the representatives of the Accord were silent. Fear blanketed the summit room like a heavy fog. They had heard it too. The entire galaxy had. The chilling certainty in the message was undeniable. We must strike now, General Crag growled, his voice low and deadly, before they think they can challenge us. But Talara, her face pale and drawn, shook her head. They are not the same as before. There's something more. We don't know what we're dealing with. We know one thing, said a representative from the Takir Dominion, his voice tight with tension. Humanity doesn't stop until they either win or burn the galaxy around them. And now, they're not just human. Back aboard the flagship, Riva watched the scattered fleets of the Accord hesitating at the edge of her sensor range. The galaxy was scrambling. Uncertainty hung in the stars. The silence before the storm. But Riva's heart was steady. She knew what was coming. Her people had spent too long in the dark. They had forged something unbreakable, something greater than they had ever been. It was time to show the galaxy the truth. Humanity had returned, and they would not bow. The galaxy had underestimated the Terran ascendancy. In the shadow of the colossal armada that encircled the outer rim of the Accord's defense line, Riva Solis stood, a figure of calm amidst the brewing storm. From the command deck of the flagship Cynosure, she gazed out at the fractured coalition of fleets that had gathered in front of her. More than 20 ships, human, alien, and machine, bore down on her forces, their intentions clear. The first move would come from them. It always did. But Riva had learned long ago to anticipate. Her people had no history of retreat, and their patience for diplomacy had long since evaporated. "Commence the zero-point emission," she ordered coldly. The command was passed through the ship's neural network, activating the weapon systems embedded deep within her fleet. The zero-point emission was not a weapon of raw destruction. It was something far more dangerous, a field of energy, woven from the fabric of space-time itself, capable of distorting the very laws of physics. In a single instant, it could render an entire fleet's weapons, shields, and propulsion systems inert, turning 1,000 warships into little more than floating debris. Before the enemy could react, the hum of energy filled the void. The effect rippled outward like a pulse, expanding across the battlefield. Within moments, the first enemy ships began to flicker and vanish from the stars. A dozen vessels were immediately disabled, their engines sputtering and their weapon systems reduced to smoking husks. A ripple of disbelief spread across the fleet of the Accord. "They're using gravimetric warfare," Talara of the Allurian Choir exclaimed in horror. "This is impossible. No one's technology should be able to do that." A second pulse from the Ascendancy fleet shattered the calm. Massive kinetic projectiles launched from Riva ships, driven by artificial gravity generators that twisted and contorted space itself. The first volley of projectiles slammed into the heart of the Accord fleet, slicing through shields like a hot knife through water. Alien ships were torn apart, their hulls splitting under the pressure of unrelenting kinetic force. In moments, the battlefield was chaos. Across the Accord fleet, a collective panic spread. Their greatest weapon, advanced AI-controlled drones, designed for precision strikes, began malfunctioning. Systems that had been years in the making turned useless as their guiding algorithms failed. Some drones spun aimlessly, while others collided in mid-flight, their explosive collisions further compounding the disarray. "What are we dealing with?" General Cragg of the Dracothi demanded, his enormous frame trembling in rage. "These aren't just humans. These are abominations. This is not natural." The air in the Accord command room crackled with tension as the communication channels flooded with confused orders, desperate pleas for reinforcements, and panicked transmissions. Riva smiled grimly. The humans had indeed become something beyond their former selves. But it wasn't just their technology that had shifted. Their very approach to war had evolved, become something that was no longer bound by the conventions of the galaxy's many races. The Ascendancy fleet moved with cold precision. There was no hesitation, no quarter given. Every action was premeditated, every strike calibrated for maximum impact. It was as if they had become a singular organism, each vessel in perfect harmony with the others. Riva watched the destruction unfold. The tension in her chest relaxed. She had no intention of destroying the Accord outright. Not yet, anyway. The galaxy needed to understand that humanity was not a forgotten relic. They were the new force in the universe. They would not fall again. "Send the message," Riva ordered, her voice low but commanding. A signal burst across the void, a flashing beacon, and then a voice. "This is the Terran Ascendancy. You have miscalculated. You have forgotten what humanity is. This galaxy will bend to us, or it will burn." The transmission repeated on every frequency, an echo that resonated through every corner of known space. The galaxy could no longer ignore humanity. The reaction was immediate. The first to respond were the Varnik, their cold, calculating minds analyzed the shifting tides of war and made their move, shifting their vast fleets into position to flank the Ascendancy Armada. Their machines moved in perfect unison, calculating every possible angle of attack. But they underestimated humanity's new advantage. Riva's fleet shifted with unnatural grace. The very fabric of space seemed to bend with every movement. The Varnic fleet, locked into their predictably symmetrical formations, found their strikes deflected, redirected, by an invisible force that emanated from the Ascendancy ships. Their laser cannons turned to plasma streams. Their missiles stopped mid-flight, redirected into the void. The battle turned in the Ascendancy's favor. But there was one thing Riva had not accounted for. The humans were not the only force in the galaxy with vast and ancient power. In the heart of the galaxy, beyond the reaches of the Ascendancy's fleet, the ancient species known as the Seers had begun to stir. They had watched quietly from the shadows of time, the only species that had never fallen into decadence or decline. Their influence had quietly shaped the history of the stars. And they had a message of their own. The Seers would not allow this new power to upset the balance of the galaxy. They too would rise. The galaxy was changing faster than anyone could comprehend. As Riva Solis surveyed the aftermath of the most decisive battle the galaxy had seen in centuries, her fleet stood victorious on the surface. The Accord had fractured under the weight of humanity's return. But as victory songs began to echo through the ranks of the Ascendancy, something else stirred in the depths of space. A shadow had fallen over the galaxy, a shadow neither predicted nor understood. The Seers, the ancient race of beings who had once governed the deep mysteries of the cosmos, had finally made their move. From their hidden sanctuaries, vast ships that defied the understanding of every race, emerged from the folds of hyperspace. Their presence was like a stain on the fabric of reality itself. They had been watching, waiting. The first thing humanity noticed was the sudden silence. The strange hum that had accompanied the Ascendancy fleet, the quantum ripples of time-space distortion, was gone. Riva felt it first, like a sudden emptiness in her mind. The battle had ceased, but not by choice. The Seers had arrived. "We've underestimated them," murmured one of Riva's lieutenants, his face pale. They're not like anything we've encountered." Riva's jaw tightened. Her eyes remained focused on the black void ahead. Her fleet was powerful, advanced beyond the comprehension of every race in the galaxy. But even she could feel the overwhelming presence of the Seers. Their ships were impossibly ancient, and their technology, if it could even be called that, was nothing short of transcendent. Each ship seemed to ripple with an energy not of this universe, manipulating space-time itself, bending the laws of physics. "Prepare for engagement," Riva ordered, her voice unwavering. "But stay alert. We don't know what they're capable of." The first Seer ship, a massive, serpentine vessel of shifting shadows and impossible angles, sent a single transmission across all frequencies. "We were here before you. We will be here long after you." The message was more than words. It was a presence, an oppressive weight that settled on the minds of every being in the galaxy, even those light years away. The message was clear. Humanity, for all its strength, was an interloper. The Seers had existed long before any race in the galaxy had risen, and they would continue after all others had passed. Without warning, the Seer ships opened fire. The energy that poured from their vessels was unlike anything the Ascendancy had encountered. It wasn't a laser. It wasn't plasma. It was a distortion, a force that could not be understood by any known science. Ships in Riva's fleet were torn apart as though reality itself had decided to erase them from existence. The explosions were silent, ripples in the fabric of space itself. Riva's flagship Cynosure shuddered, but she didn't flinch. The ship's core hummed with energy, shifting into defensive mode. The Cynosure bent space around it, deflecting the Seer's energy with a barrier of quantum disruption. But even that was beginning to crack under the strain. "Retreat is not an option," Riva said, her eyes narrowing. "We fight or we die. Set course for their flagship." Her order was clear. Her people, humanity, had never been known for backing down from a fight. And she wasn't about to start now. The Ascendancy's fleet surged forward, weapons blazing, but the Seers were simply too powerful. Each shot they fired unraveled the very fabric of the universe around the Ascendancy ships. It was a battle between a fledgling power and something beyond the stars, a clash of mortality against something ancient, timeless, and incomprehensible. Despite the overwhelming odds, humanity did not falter. Ships poured everything they had into the fight, pushing their engines and weapons beyond safe limits. The very nature of their existence had been shaped by survival, by a relentless drive to evolve, to overcome. They would not let the Seers crush them so easily. As the battle raged on, the Ascendancy fleet began to adapt, to learn. Riva's command of the fleet was precise, cold. They had become something more than human in their evolution. Machines, flesh, and consciousness woven together in perfect harmony. They didn't just fight back, they anticipated, countered, and outmaneuvered the Seers' attacks. Every second was an eternity as they adapted in real time, pushing the limits of their technology, their understanding of the universe. But despite their best efforts, the Seers' power was undeniable. The universe itself seemed to bend and shudder as the ancient beings unleashed their ultimate weapon, a wave of energy that didn't just destroy, it unmade. Entire fleets disappeared from existence, reduced to nothingness. And then, just as the Ascendancy's forces were on the brink of collapse, something unexpected happened. One of the Seer ships, massive, yet shimmering with an impossible light, detached itself from the formation and sent out a transmission. This one was not a threat, but a question. Do you seek to dominate, or do you seek to understand? Riva paused. The words rippled through her, reverberating with something deeper than conflict. It was a call to humanity's true nature, the very essence that had propelled them from the ashes of Earth. The battle slowed. Ships stopped firing. The Seers, for the first time, watched, and the galaxy held its breath. In that moment, Riva realized the truth. Humanity had not returned to conquer the stars. No. Humanity had returned to prove something far more dangerous. They were not just survivors, but creators, innovators. They were the beginning of something new, a force of nature that would reshape the galaxy, not through force alone, but through understanding, through the endless pursuit of evolution. Her response, when it came, was simple. We seek both. And in that moment, the galaxy, unchanged for eons, saw the spark of a new dawn. End. I hope you enjoyed this conclusion. Let me know if you'd like any revisions or further stories.